Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we're returning to the subject of HexOS, that layer, that wrapper, that interface that is being designed around the very complicated subject of TrueNAS, trying to keep it as user-friendly as possible, ultimately serving, they say, as a gateway into DIY NAS solutions a great deal more easily. Now, it is something we've talked about in the channel for a long time, notwithstanding the fact that I talk about NAS on the channel a lot. You'll know if you followed the channel for a while, one of the main remits of this channel is to take the mystified and difficult and jargon heavy realm of network attached storage and server and private data ownership and make it a great deal more user friendly. It's why we talk a lot about turnkey NAS solutions here on the channel. And that is kind of what Hex is trying to be, they say, for TrueNAS deployment. And in this video, we're going to be going through a lot of the bells and whistles that have been added since the last time we discussed this at the start of December, going through some of those release notes. And again, I'll link to these all in the description below, where we go through what has been added in that time, what is still yet to be added, and ultimately, do we like what we see? But I will say straight away, even though we are in Q1 2026, we're still yet to have that local access. You can see there at the top, I'm still accessing this via that web portal there. And again, until they establish that local access, and again, they allude to it and they are prepping for it in the January 2021 update. They do talk about it in the back end. They are pushing a lot of that code to get that prepared, but we're still yet to see that. So if you've come to this video, you're still waiting. Trust me, it's not there yet. But one of the probably main things they've integrated there is alignment alongside, of course, TrueNAS's biggest deployment, the latest deployment there for TrueNAS, and that is the rollout of Goldeye, the latest big update. Spell TrueNAS correctly there, Rob. Goldeye is now integrated there, and the update works within the latest version there. They talked about this in previous updates. They kind of have to do the whole cat and mouse alongside larger TrueNAS updates, but it does look like the update time between formal one-click updates of HexOS and TrueNAS is a great deal easier there. And indeed, I updated to Goldeye via this interface here, which is pretty good. Now, alongside the synchronization of HexOS and Goldeye, the other meaningful part of the recent update is to do with the apps. Now, on the face of it, I was actually a little underwhelmed at first. To put that into perspective, when you go into that big update there, or at least a blog post update from December 26, they talk about a complete redesign. And on the face of it, when you first read it, it does seem a little bit like putting lipstick on a pig. It is simply a case you go into the App Center and they have broken it down into categories now. Something that is fairly common on other platforms there. But when you dig into it, it's actually a lot more than it seems. Now, you go into the curated app section, and the first thing you notice is there now more curated apps. There's still not absolutely loads, but as they mentioned in another update, once they nailed down the logic, it does seem that the number of curated applications for Hex is going to get bigger. That is, applications that when you do one-click install, they have pre-designated permissions and folder structure that can kind of sync with what you've already got there, which is, you know, probably at its best when it comes to the multimedia, but obviously a lot of smart home download applications and more that might come in quite useful. But the other part of the meaningful update, I will say, and we'll go into Plex for this. Plex will be the best example of this. Not only now, when you go into an application, is there the option to update the individual app from within the App Center, something that can be rather complicated when done outside of a traditional app environment on turnkey NAS solutions, which have this whole one-click app structure. But what's intriguing is the options menu here, because now alongside these curated applications, they are putting contextual configuration. So for example, here in Plex, if you've got that Plex token, you can enter that now from within the HexOS interface there. But more importantly, you've got Plex Pass options there. So if you do have Plex Pass, you can then update that configuration to take advantage of that. In the case of Plex, of course, that would be a lot to do with hardware transcoding. Now, it's no coincidence that has seemingly come about at the same time as what they put in their own update notes as intelligent GPU configuration. Now, what that means is within HexOS, it should be able to detect if there's integrated graphics or a GPU. Again, it's a pretty broad statement given how many options are out there once you factor in drivers and more, but still nonetheless, it's quite nice to have that option in there integrated into some of these apps and services, which again is where something like Plex Pass, where you require that for hardware transcoding to be integrated in. But I will say, for all of the talk of curated apps, when you look at all of the different applications and services, if we go into Jellyfin here, which is installing as we speak, but if we go into something like Image, there are no contextual options. It just directs me to go to expert mode, which is just TrueNAS. That's all what expert mode is, and we'll come back to that later on. And indeed, I've already started installing a number of these different applications and services, some of which are the curated applications, and the curated apps, the majority of them still tell me to go to expert mode. So the level of those configuration and options that are tailored to individual apps still seems very early days, even on the supposedly called curated applications. So again, I can't really call that a widespread feature at this time, but it's a nice idea of a direction they're going in. Even Jellyfin, after I installed it, doesn't give me that level of curation, and I'm not suggesting it needs to be as complicated as something like Plex with Plex Pass, but still, I think this is a bit early doors to be calling out this is a great feature when it's really only available currently in barely any of these so-called curated applications. The folder creation is there, but these extra tailored options just pointing me towards expert mode feels a bit of a swizz. Now, I am being a little harsh. I do think we have to at least keep the perspective of just how meaningful it is for this to be a one-click install and configuring this being as easy as it is. Now, if you've never used TrueNAS before, let's say, for example, let's go in TrueNAS, say you wanted to set up Plex for the first time, because I think a lot of users lose sight of that while looking at software like this. First, you would need to find the Plex Media Server application via Discovery within the App Center there, so you would go ahead and try to find it, and there'll be numerous options open to you there, but let's not go for Plex. We'll install something else. Let's go for MB. Is MB available on the store? If we're trying to install MB, the first thing you need to do is go ahead, confirm that you're using a third-party application, and from there you would have to build the MB server containerized application out the gate. So you're already going to need to have created that folder structure and those individual data sets to start with, and then start linking them towards it. So from that, what I mean is, and we've talked about this in a recent video, you'd have to go into the data set section, go ahead and create brand new data sets. So we would go for that one for multimedia, or if we don't already have one from the other applications and services, you would then have to set it as an application folder. From there, you would then have to create it first before you would make your way into the installation of installing something like MB onto this system to direct that. And that's notwithstanding creating folders for the logs, creating folders for transcoding as well, and giving access to the transcoding engine from within the application. The point I'm making is the idea that I can just one-click these apps is important and is meaningful there. Think like we've got MB there, I could just go ahead and one-click install this app in, and that's it. And that's why it's important that we don't lose sight of just how much more user-friendly that is going to be for users that don't want to have to go through, frankly, trial and error when they don't quite know exactly how to install these apps and services. But it's still not over the finish line, and I still query whether at this time it is worth the license cost for these one-click installs, because realistically, most people are going to say it's not. Another thing that was highlighted in those updates was to do with two-factor authentication. Now, maybe I'm wildly misunderstanding something here, and please let me know in the comments if I am. Two-factor authentication here, from what I can see in this update, seemingly only applies to that online account. So when I go to my online account, I can enable two-factor authentication there. Now, right now, accessing my HexOS server here, of course, I'm going to have to use that online account to do it, because I'm accessing it via that web portal, as we've discussed previously. But I would like that feature here, because right now, yes, they haven't integrated local access yet, so I get it. But right now, if I went into TrueNAS expert mode, as they call it, I'd go into system, go into advanced settings, and there on the bottom right is global two-factor authentication there. Now, I'm not going to enable that here because, frankly, it will probably break things with the way it's set up within HexOS and its streamlined interface there. But the reason I bring the matter up is I would have liked to have seen the integration and the creation of two-factor authentication built in here. Because if this is going to be enabling that local access, I want two-factor authentication to also be integrated into the local IP access. The idea that two-factor authentication can only be applied onto the online portal and not onto the local access is going to be problematic for me once local access is established. So I hope those two things are going to roll out at pretty much the same time. And for that to be the case, it's going to need to be user creation built here into the interface. Because, for example, I'm using my Hex identity and the login information to log into this device. And of course, in TrueNAS, you can create multiple users very, very easily there. So in order for two-factor authentication to be extended towards this interface, you would have to start factoring in things like multi-user creation there to get into the system. Something else that is weirdly absent. Again, I know this is an in-development platform there, and they did not say in the update that they were going to add multi-user access, but it's just another example of what I mean about some of the fundamentals still needing to be addressed. Moving forward, the next thing they talk about is to do with enabling expert mode for power users. Now, we've already addressed this in a previous update where we saw in the preferences, we could see that you could enable experimental features. That was early access to some of the bells and whistles that are getting gradually integrated in and experimented with, and then hopefully rolled out in a stable form within HexOS. But now you can enable expert mode. As you may have noticed earlier in this video, certain icons denote options that have appeared because of this. However, I will say expert mode seemingly, at least right now, just seems to be when you press a button and it takes you to TrueNAS. So do you remember earlier when we were looking at the apps and features, you can see the experimental mode one there, but say for example, if we go into scrutiny monitoring and we go into some of those contextual options on the right hand side, we can see that it's just the spyglasses to configure it directly outside of this and into TrueNAS mode. So again, I like that they're integrating that feature. I like that they're setting the boundaries and the pathway for that, for those advanced mode settings. Hopefully, when they move towards multiple users and therefore that option can be removed at the behest of an admin. But still, it is, again, another one of those parts of the update that once you really drill down into it, isn't massive. It's more a foundational quality that they're putting in that hopefully down the road we'll see them stretch muscles with. As previously discussed, I like the idea of HexOS, and they are slowly but surely creating something here. And when you head over to their forum, they are responding to users. There is an active community over there, and clearly there is a demand for something like this. But as previously discussed and repeated often, it's about that local access right now. And I think that is kind of going to make or break this project. I'm sorry to be so repetitious, but it's right now how and when they roll out local access and the stability of it will be a turning point on this product. And right now, without it, it just feels like all of the fundamental stuff they're building right now will not be for anything until people can utilize this on the IP. But we'll have to wait and see. But this has been the update for the last couple of months from the beginning of December right the way through to the start of February. As soon as that local access update rolls out, of course, we'll be talking about it. But for everything else, do let me know in the comments if you're utilizing HexOS right now, how you're finding it, or what is it going to be the turning point for you that makes you jump on board this train. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.